Hi, how are you doing? April is finally coming to an end. It's been a good month of reading for me. I read 7 books that I want to talk to you about today. The temperature is finally getting better. It's sunny outside. I'm super excited about that. I haven't seen the sun in months. I've had a really good month of reading. I think I really pushed myself to read more this month than I usually do. It's a month that I went a little bit outside of my comfort zone. I picked up books that were on my shelves for a long time that I didn't really gravitate towards, and then when I read them, I actually really enjoyed them. We have 2 romances, 3 fantasies, and 2 classics. So let's get into it. So at the beginning of the month, I picked up a romance, which is extremely outside of my comfort zone. I decided to pick up Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. I know that a lot of people talk about this trilogy that she has, with Just for the Summer, I think, being the most popular one in this trilogy. So I decided to read the first one, and I am so glad I did. It is the first romance that I've read where I actually felt like this is a good book. It's the story of Alexis, who is a very successful ER doctor. She works in New York, and she is living with a lot of pressures from her family in terms of her success and her career. And then there's also pressures about who she is going to end up with. She just got out of a toxic relationship with another doctor who her parents are really excited about, and all of her friends are very excited about, but she is not, and she does not want to date him anymore. And she accidentally meets a small town kind of guy. His name is Daniel, and they end up having a one-night stand, but it eventually becomes more than just the one-night stand, and it's so freaking good. I listened to the audiobook, and the narrators in the audiobook, I thought, did a really great job of showing both the perspective of Alexis and Daniel. I feel like there's a lot of conversations always about men not being able to write women, but oh my god, can we talk about women not being able to write men? I feel like maybe that's one of the things that puts me off so badly when I read romances. Not the only thing, but one of the things. I feel like all of the men are so clearly written by women for women. It's like it's not a real person to me. I can't imagine a man that I know talking the way some guys talk in some romance books. But I think Abby Jimenez is so absolutely amazing at writing guys. She makes them come out of the page. She makes them real. I absolutely love the dual perspective, and I think she is a very talented writer, especially when it comes to characterization of the characters. I think she does an amazing job of making you see their world and understand them as people, and kind of transports you out of that, oh, I'm actually reading a book, and it's more like, oh, I'm witnessing a reality that is in front of me. I really enjoyed this. It has some small town cozy vibes as well, because Daniel lives in a small town. All in all, I absolutely love this book. I am so excited to have finally found an author that I think aligns a lot with what I enjoy in reading romances, and I'm definitely going to pick up more Abby Jimenez. And in fact, the next book that I picked up was another Abby Jimenez. It was Yours Truly. I ended up actually getting the copy of the book. So this is the second installment in that trilogy that I just talked about. I don't think you need to necessarily read them in order. They're all separate stories with separate people living their own lives, but there are little hints in places of characters from previous books, and so if you do read them in order, it probably will enhance your experience, but you don't have to. So Yours Truly is the story of Brianna, who is the best friend of Alexis from the previous book, and Brianna is going through a very messy divorce. She's also a doctor, and at the beginning of the book, because she's going through a divorce and she's trying to kind of find again her identity, she decides to run up for a promotion in her field. We find out that there's actually a new doctor coming in, and he is also considered for this position, and she starts to kind of hate this guy just because of that. There's also a couple of accidents that happen with them at the beginning where they both kind of get an impression that the other one hates them, and Brianna definitely doesn't really like him, but these feelings start to change once she starts to see his perspective. Jacob is very different from the guy in the first book, Daniel. He is much more emotional. He deals with anxiety and he is very attuned to his emotions. This is something also that I like, is that Abby Jimenez doesn't just keep to one idea of what a man is. In the first book, the man was very much manly and like, you know, big muscles and manual worker. Whereas in the second book, we have a completely different type of man. And I love that she's able to dabble into these different characteristics of what a man can be. I think it's a really enriching experience for the reader. I also loved this book. I didn't like it as much as the first. I think the first, maybe I liked it a bit more just because it was more related to my subjective interests, like the small town vibes. This one is completely set in the city and around the hospital where both of these characters work. I like that even though these are romance books and romance is the biggest part of the plot, all of the characters involved, specifically the main characters, they all have their own storylines and their own struggles that they're going through the book. I am saving up just for the summer, which is the third book in the series for the summer, but I'm really happy that I decided to pick this up. And Abby Jimenez might just be my new favorite romance author. Okay, we are getting to my favorite book of this month, which was 1984 by George Orwell. I made an entire video reading this book, my experience reading it, my thoughts reading it. It's such an impactful work. Even if you're not necessarily into politics, I think you should still read it. I think there's so much more there than just politics. There's a lot of psychological discussions about trauma. We are set in a dystopian socialist society. The whole entire world has kind of been redivided and redistributed into 3 countries. There's the country of Oceania, where our main character Winston is. And there's 2 other countries, East Asia and Eurasia. All of these countries are totalitarian. They're all regimes of power in which the people tend to live very difficult lives and struggle a lot. Winston, who is a worker for the government, starts his journey of rebelling a little bit against this kind of regime. The book starts off from being a very subdued rebelling, a rebelling within himself, a rebelling by just thinking, a rebelling by just writing out his thoughts, because thinking and writing is prohibited in the society. And eventually he does end up meeting other people who have similar interests and beliefs as him. But the way I'm just describing this book feels so void of all the beauty that is there. There's so much more there. The plot itself, it may not be the most original thing, but the way that the book is executed, the ideas that are put forward in this book are so smart. I highly encourage you to read it, and if you want more specific thoughts about this, go check out my video that I made solely on this book. I also read Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This has been a book that I wanted to pick up for a really long time. I know a lot of people love this book and it's been making the rounds on YouTube and on TikTok. It's a very fantastical world. We are following Bree, who is dealing with trauma. Her mom has recently passed away. She begins a new school year at a university and she gets swept up in a secret society that is descendant from King Arthur and the myth and the legend of King Arthur. Bree also seems to have all these powers that she doesn't know where they come from, and so it's a little bit of an exploration of her trying to make sense of her own identity, her own powers, and also see if there might be a link between her mom and this secret society that she's just part of. Overall, I think the book started really interesting, and then for me it was a bit of a letdown. I thought that there was a lot of telling and not a lot of showing in this book. Felt like the pacing was off a lot of the times. The whole entire narrative happens very quickly and the characters get to have these very intense emotions about one another and develops in a span of just a couple weeks, which to me felt off. I do see the merits of this book. I think this book does have interesting topics discussed, and I do think that there's some interesting plot lines, but overall to me it did not really land a mark. I think that there's other fantasies out there that are much more elaborate than this one, and this one was just kind of a miss for me. I also did a little readathon where I read shorter works, and the first one is T. Kingfisher's Thorn Hedge. This is a retelling, or maybe a reimagining actually, of the story of Sleeping Beauty. The story itself is told from the perspective of Toadling, which is the fairy who is supposed to guard Sleeping Beauty in her castle. And Toadling is doing that for centuries until one day a prince comes along, Halim, and he decides that he wants to find out what's in this castle, and along the way he gets to know Toadling a little bit more and know her story. I'm not a fan of reimaginings and retellings. I think this was very well written. I think that T. Kim Fisher definitely has a good command of her tone and her writing, absolutely. But in terms of the story itself, I was a bit bored. I'm not a fan of fairy tales. I'm not a fan of retellings either. And so for me, this was a little bit boring, but I do really love the writing in here. And I am definitely thinking of picking up a new book by this author in the future. The next book that I read is part of this collection of stories by Brandon Sanderson, and that is The Emperor's Soul. I know that The Emperor's Soul is one of his most beloved works, especially standalones, and I was really excited to get to it, and I'm so happy that I did. It's a really masterfully written story. Brandon Sanderson is just a master of creating and imagining fantasy worlds. This specific world, it has some inspiration from Chinese and Korean cultures. We are following Shai, who is a forger. Essentially, what a forger does in the society is that she has powers to inscribe in some way a sort of code in stamps. And when you stamp an object or a person, the code that you've inscribed in that stamp is able to recreate an object in a different way, or to recreate a person in a different way. A lot of the work that she's doing is recreating ancient pieces of art, or recreating ancient relics or architecture. It's really beautiful the way that he explores magic and art and how they blend together. At the beginning of the story, Shai is in prison. She has committed a forgery of a very important art piece for the emperor, and so she's thrown into prison and she's about to be executed. However, the people around the emperor have a little bit of a problem, and the problem is that the emperor was severely wounded. He has had surgeons work on him. Essentially, his body is all fine, but his brain is no longer working. And so they ask Shai to recreate his brain, essentially, to create a copy of himself, to create a copy of his soul. He may live again, be an emperor again, and their enemies don't take control of the throne. Recreating someone's soul is something Shai has never done before. She's done it to herself in some capacity, and there's a little bit of discussion about that, which is really interesting, but she's never done it to another person. Recreating someone's soul is quite the challenge, because she has to literally know and explore that person's past, know their emotions, know their behavior, how they would react to certain situations. She has to literally recreate every detail of someone's spirituality and personality, so that no one can actually tell that this is just a copy and it's not the actual emperor. Always when I read a short story, I am concerned that I'm not going to be able to relate to the characters as much, and I'm not gonna be able to get myself as immersed in the story because it's so quick, and so I feel like the pacing is always off. But this was not the case with this book. I really enjoyed it. To my knowledge, there's no plan or project to expand this story into other books, but I really wish there was, because this was such an interesting world to be part of. I'm so excited to read all of Brandon Sanderson's books and to continue my journey with that. The last book that I read is Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. This was my very first Steinbeck. It's the story of two middle-aged men, George and Lenny, who are workers during the Great Depression in America. George is this tiny man. He is a little bit cynical. He is a little bit rough around the edges. And then we have Lenny, who is this bigger man. He's a sweet person, but unfortunately he is disabled. He had an accident when he was a kid, and so he has some challenges. They don't have immediate family. They are kind of living on their own. They don't have a house, so they just go from location to location that is able to employ them on different ranches where they're able to do some manual labor. Their ultimate goal is to raise enough money to buy a house and make a little farm for themselves and just live content lives. It's a very, very heartbreaking story. Both of them, but especially Lenny, is met with so much racism and classism. You could see him just trying to exist within his innocence in a very cruel world. Him being a man who doesn't really understand the ways in which people make fun of him or the way in which people treat him sometimes, and George always trying to stand up for him and be there and protect him from these people. It's the saddest book that I've read this year. All that being said, I think it was a really good book. This got me excited into looking more into John Steinbeck and maybe read some of his bigger works like The Grapes of Wrath or East of Eden, which I'm really excited to get into as well. Those were all the books that I read in April. I have some amazing plans for May. I want to expand a little bit my reading interests in May, and so I'm really excited about that. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you're having a great reading and sunny day.